It happened on my first day at Larkin Industries, a tech firm that looked more like a glass cathedral than an office. Everyone moved briskly, dressed like success itself. I remember clutching my coffee too tightly, trying to appear invisible. I'd been hired as a junior analyst, a step down from my previous role, but after months of unemployment, I told myself pride wouldn't pay the bills. The lobby buzzed with conversations I wasn't part of. When I tried greeting people, they smiled politely but looked past me, as if I were a smudge on the glass walls. Even the receptionist's tone was clipped, her eyes already darting to the next person. I felt small, almost transparent. Then I noticed her, near the far window, a woman in a light blue scarf, signing to a delivery worker. Her movements were graceful, intentional, almost like dance. She glanced at me once, briefly, and smiled. I smiled back, relieved for any scrap of warmth in that cold marble hall. Later, during the orientation meeting, I sat at the end of a long table. No one spoke to me. I dropped my pen, and as I bent to pick it up, I saw her again, the woman from the lobby. She was seated across the room, her scarf now tucked neatly into her blazer. When our eyes met, she gave a small nod, then raised her hand subtly and signed a single word. "Welcome." I froze. Few people knew I had a deaf younger sister. I'd learned sign language growing up, but rarely used it since. I hesitated, then signed back, "Thank you." A faint smile curved her lips. But as I looked around, I realized the CEO, Mr. Larkin himself, was standing by the glass wall, watching her, watching us, his expression unreadable. I felt a strange shiver, like I had just stepped into the middle of a test I didn't know I was taking. Sometimes, the first person who sees you isn't just being kind. They're revealing who everyone else truly is. Her name was Emily. She worked in communications, though no one seemed to communicate with her. During lunch, people drifted toward their cliques. Marketing sat with marketing, engineers huddled by their screens, executives dined upstairs behind frosted glass. I took my tray to a quiet corner. Emily passed by, tray in hand, and paused. She signed, "Mind if I join you?" I nodded, a little startled but grateful. She smiled and sat down. The blue scarf she wore that morning rested now around her wrist, tied like a ribbon. We spoke half in words, half in signs. Her voice was soft but deliberate, each word chosen carefully. She explained she was partially deaf. Her hearing had faded over the years, and she preferred to sign when possible. I told her about my sister, Mia, and how learning sign language was the only way we'd truly connected growing up. That made her smile wider. "I always feel," she said slowly, "that people hear sound, but not meaning." It was the kind of thing that lingered after she said it. Halfway through lunch, I noticed people staring. Some looked curious, others uneasy. When Emily got up to leave, one of the senior analysts leaned toward me and said under his breath, "You're making quite an impression. Careful who you talk to here." I didn't know what he meant, but his smirk told me it wasn't meant kindly. That afternoon, while sorting through onboarding documents, I caught sight of the CEO again through the glass. He was on the upper level, leaning against the railing, watching the floor below. Watching me. And though I couldn't be sure from that distance, I had the unnerving sense that Emily's name had just left his lips. I told myself not to read into it, but some part of me knew this was no ordinary office, and Emily's kindness wasn't something people here celebrated. Sometimes the quietest people in the room hold the loudest secrets. 2 days later, I received an email from HR marked urgent. It wasn't a reprimand exactly, but it made my pulse quicken. "Please report to conference room B at 2 p.m. for a preliminary evaluation meeting with executive staff." An evaluation? I'd barely been there a week. My hands trembled as I reread the message, wondering if I'd already broken some unspoken rule. When I arrived, the room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Mr. Larkin sat at the head of the table, his silver cufflinks gleaming under the lights. Next to him was a woman from HR, tablet in hand. Across from them, Emily. Her scarf was back around her neck, and her face was unreadable. "Mr. Hale," the CEO began, his tone courteous but distant. "We have a culture here, one built on discretion and focus. We value teamwork, but also professionalism. You understand?" "Yes, sir," I said carefully. He nodded, folding his hands. "Then perhaps you can explain why you've been socializing with certain employees during office hours, particularly with Miss Grant." Emily's gaze flicked toward me, then back to the table. I swallowed. We just had lunch together, sir. I didn't realize that was against policy. A faint smile touched his lips, cold and deliberate. Not against policy, merely unorthodox. You see, Miss Grant is under a special mentorship program, one I oversee personally. We prefer her focus remain uninterrupted. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. A warning wrapped in politeness. Then he added, almost casually, consider this a reminder. In this company, every relationship is observed. Every gesture, evaluated. Emily's hands twitched slightly in her lap. She signed a single word to me under the table. Careful. I didn't respond, but my chest tightened. That day I learned the first rule of Larkin Industries. Kindness, in this place, came with consequences. And from that moment on, every smile felt like a test. From that day forward, the office felt different. The walls seemed to listen. Conversations dropped when I entered a room. Even my emails were suddenly copied to oversight addresses I'd never seen before. Still, Emily and I found small ways to communicate, silent exchanges that no one else seemed to notice. When she passed my desk, she'd brush her fingers lightly against her scarf. It was our quiet signal. I'm okay. Sometimes, when she'd glance toward the CEO's glass office upstairs, she'd tap her pen twice. He's watching. One morning, she left a folded note on my desk under a stack of reports. It read, "Don't ask questions here. Listen instead. You'll hear what they think they've hidden." That afternoon, I did. During a budget meeting, two senior analysts were whispering near the projector. I caught fragments. Grant, cover up. Emily's file. I pretended to jot notes, but every word sharpened like static in my ears. Later, in the break room, I asked a simple question. How long has Emily been here? The room went still. Someone muttered, longer than she should have been. Then silence again. That night, I stayed late under the pretense of finishing reports. The floor emptied. The cleaning crew arrived. I walked past the rows of cubicles toward the executive corridor. The door to the records room was ajar. Inside, I found shelves of employee files, thick folders, each tagged by department. Emily's file was thicker than most. I hesitated before opening it. But something about that scarf, the quiet courage she carried, pushed me on. The first page was ordinary. Employment history, commendations, nothing unusual. But further in, I found letters, personal ones, from Mr. Larkin himself. Notes about monitoring progress, observing interpersonal behavior, and one phrase that made my stomach knot. Subject continues to form attachments despite directive. Recommend renewed isolation. I closed the file, my hands cold. Whatever Emily was part of, it wasn't a mentorship program. It was something far stranger, and I had just stepped into it. Sometimes, the truth doesn't knock. It whispers from behind locked doors. The next morning, Emily wasn't at her desk. Her chair sat pushed in neatly, the scarf missing from the back of it. I tried to focus on my spreadsheets, but the air felt off, too quiet, too observed. By noon, I couldn't take it anymore. I sent her a discreet message through the company chat system. Are you okay? No reply. Just the blinking message delivered, icon that never turned blue. That evening, as I left the building, I spotted her across the street at the small cafe where we'd sometimes grab coffee before work. She was sitting by the window, hands folded, eyes scanning the street. When she saw me, she gestured subtly for me to wait. Then she slipped outside, scarf tied tight against the wind. I shouldn't talk long, she said quietly. They monitor more than you think. I told her I'd seen her file. The blood drained from her face. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she sighed, signing slowly as she spoke. He tests people. That's all he does. He creates traps to see who follows their conscience. I frowned. Tests them? For what? For loyalty. For silence. She explained that years ago, she joined Larkin Industries under a diversity initiative for people with disabilities. But soon, she realized it wasn't inclusion, it was observation. The CEO ran social experiments within the company, measuring employees' reactions to unfair treatment, ethical choices, and interpersonal compassion. Emily was his unknowing test subject until she figured it out. He calls it moral stress testing, she said bitterly. But it's just cruelty dressed as leadership. I felt my pulse hammering. Every cold glance, every whisper, it all made sense now. We were lab rats in suits. Then she looked at me, eyes fierce. You were the first one who spoke to me without agenda. That's why he's watching you. You're his next test. Her words hit like thunder. Suddenly, it wasn't about her anymore. It was about what I'd choose next: kindness or compliance, truth or comfort. Sometimes the test you're taking isn't on paper, it's written on your soul. After that night, everything changed. The office that once felt merely cold now felt predatory. Every email I sent was scrutinized. Every meeting became a theater of politeness. Smiles that didn't reach the eyes, compliments with hidden edges. I could almost sense invisible hands moving pieces around me. Emily returned 2 days later. She looked pale, exhausted. The blue scarf was gone. When I asked if she was okay, she only shook her head slightly and mouthed, "Not here." Later that day, I received an invitation to a leadership evaluation session. It was mandatory. The subject line read, "Confidential Character Mapping Initiative." I didn't have to guess what that meant. In the conference room, 6 of us sat around a circular table. Mr. Larkin entered, followed by a silent assistant holding a tablet. The CEO smiled, his voice smooth as glass. "Today," he said, "we're testing response integrity. You'll each receive a scenario and must decide, in real time, how to act." He handed me a folder. Inside was a case study about a hypothetical employee who had breached confidentiality by helping a colleague under observation. The instructions were clear: recommend disciplinary action, justify the decision, and sign. But I recognized the details. It was Emily's story disguised. The scarf, the mentorship note, even the delivery worker she'd helped in the lobby that first day. Across the table, Emily sat still, her eyes on the folder in front of her. She didn't look up. The others began writing, pens scratching briskly. I stared at the page, my heart pounding. I knew what they expected me to do: condemn her, prove my objectivity. Then I felt something brush my shoe. I glanced down. A scrap of paper lay there, folded twice. I unfolded it under the table. In neat, small letters it read, "The test ends when someone refuses to play." Emily's handwriting. My hand trembled. I looked up, meeting her eyes across the table. She gave the faintest nod. In that moment, I realized this wasn't about right or wrong in theory. It was about courage in practice. Sometimes integrity isn't quiet obedience. It's the moment you decide to stop pretending. I put down the pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. Around me, papers rustled as the others finished signing their forms, glancing at one another with that anxious desire to please. Mr. Larkin turned toward me, his polite smile unwavering. "Mr. Hale," he said softly, "you haven't completed your evaluation." I met his gaze. "No, sir. I can't." The air grew heavier. His assistant stopped typing. Emily's eyes flickered with something: fear, pride, both. "Can't," he repeated, his tone silk over steel. "Or won't." "Won't," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "This isn't an evaluation. It's cruelty disguised as management. You're not measuring integrity. You're punishing empathy." For a long, awful second, no one spoke. Then Larkin leaned back, studying me like an entomologist studying a bug. "Fascinating," he murmured. "Every quarter, there's always one who breaks pattern." He rose slowly. "You think kindness makes you strong, Mr. Hale. But strength is choosing the company over sentiment. People like Miss Grant," he let the name hang, "they distract the good-hearted. And good-hearted people are unreliable." Emily stood then, her voice shaking but clear. "You're wrong. They're the only reliable ones." Larkin's smile vanished. "Miss Grant, you are dismissed." But before she could move, I spoke. "No, she's not. If you want to fire someone, fire me." His eyes locked onto mine. For a moment, I thought he might. Then, with a faint smirk, he turned to his assistant. "In session." The lights dimmed. The other employees left quickly, avoiding my eyes. Larkin didn't stop me as I helped Emily out of the room, but I could feel his stare between my shoulder blades all the way down the hall. Outside, she exhaled shakily. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered. "Maybe not," I said, but I couldn't not. Sometimes doing the right thing doesn't save you. It simply proves who you are. The next morning, my ID badge didn't work. The scanner blinked red, again and again. No one at reception would meet my eyes. Emily wasn't there either. I stood in the gleaming lobby, holding the useless card like a symbol of everything I had just lost. I should have been angry, or afraid, but what I felt was strangely calm. I walked to the cafe across the street, the one where Emily and I had spoken before. She was there, waiting, a new scarf wrapped around her neck. Green this time, not blue. I guess this might happen, she said. He always finds a way to erase people who won't play along. I nodded. So what now? She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Thin, plain, but heavy with truth. Inside were copies of reports, memos, hidden evaluations, the same kind I had seen in her file. But there were dozens of them, maybe hundreds. Each one detailing how employees had been manipulated, tested, broken down. I started collecting these years ago, she said quietly. I didn't have anyone I could trust until now. We sat there for a long while, the city moving around us, and decided what to do. 2 weeks later, an anonymous expose appeared online. It detailed Larkin's moral stress testing program, complete with evidence and testimonies. Within days, investors pulled funding, the board intervened, and the company began unraveling from within. No one ever traced the leak back to us. Emily found work at a nonprofit for hearing-impaired youth. I started consulting for small businesses, places where empathy wasn't treated like a liability. Months later, a letter arrived at my new office. No return address, just a simple note inside. Kindness is the only test that matters. I keep it tucked inside my notebook. Sometimes, when I doubt the worth of decency in a world that rewards calculation, I open it again. Because every now and then, life hands you a test you didn't sign up for. One that asks not what you know, but who you choose to be. And that answer, I've learned, is never wasted. A year has passed since Larkin Industries collapsed under the weight of its own arrogance. The building still stands, glass gleaming, empty as a monument to pride. Sometimes I walk past it on my way to meetings, watching the wind shift through its hollow corridors. You can almost hear the echoes of ambition, the kind that forgets to listen for truth. Emily and I still talk, though not often. She sends short messages, updates about the kids she mentors, snapshots of their small triumphs, a child signing their first word, a classroom laughing in perfect silence. The green scarf appears in every photo, like a thread that ties the past to something purer. I once asked her if she regretted staying as long as she did at Larkin. She said, no. It taught me what power really is, not control, but connection. I think about that often, especially when I meet people who lead through fear instead of trust. They always seem confident, until you realize they're terrified of empathy, because empathy can't be faked, or bought, or ordered. The last time we met, over coffee on a rainy afternoon, Emily said something that stayed with me. She tapped her cup lightly and signed. You never know who's watching, but you always know who you are. That's the legacy she gave me. To choose kindness even when it costs, to see people even when others look away, and to keep speaking, whether with words, with hands, or with quiet acts that ripple further than we ever imagine. So if you ever find yourself in a place where decency feels dangerous, remember this. The test isn't meant to break you. It's meant to reveal you. And sometimes, the smallest gesture, a simple welcome, can change the ending for everyone.